ready, Linda?
Well, actually,
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Thank you for coming out this evening. My name is Nicole Smith. I work here at the History Center. Just a couple of things before we get started. We are streaming this on Facebook and on Zoom. So if you have any questions for the speaker, just type them into the chat or comments. If you'd like to see this presentation after today, it will be on the York County History Center YouTube channel. We have a couple of fun things coming up at the History Center. March 1st, we have free Fosnuts in the morning, so come on down. The South Central Genealogy Society regular meeting is March 6th, and the program is on 18th century gunsmithing. Our second Saturday program is going to be, our speaker is Kim Hoagman, and speaking about the Yorktown Hotel project. Our Civil War Roundtable program is March 16th. That's Ron Coddington speaking about Faces of Civil War Nurses. And our next month Allvets speaker will be March 23rd, and that'll be Bob Zimmerman, speaking about his time in Korea and at the Pentagon. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. It's Mark Askey, who will speak about his experiences in Iraq. Thank you.
Okay, Ricky.
You got a crowd.
Oh, good evening. First of all, thanks for everybody that came out that's here. I'm sure that there's a lot of other things you could do, but you took the time out of your busy day to come here and do this. So I appreciate you for doing that. And before I forget, make no mistake about it. My belief is that the only reason I'm standing here today is by the grace of God. And if it wasn't for that simple fact right there, I probably wouldn't be here in front of y'all. And so, although I'm far away from any battles right now at the moment, and life seems like it's going fairly well, I never forget where I've been, and I never forget where I come from. So a lot of the things I talk about, some of it can be brash because I spent most of my life around soldiers. And when you spend most of your life around soldiers, your language is a little bit different. You use things like the HQ building, or which is your headquarters building, or TOT, time on target, and things like that. So if I get too out of hand, just let me know and we'll switch it up. And also my wife's here tonight. Thanks for coming, Jenny. Appreciate that. And my granddaughter, Maria. It's always great to look out and see them and appreciate life. And why I did what I did for close to 26 years. So let me get into it here. So you already know my name. I came from a small town in Western Pennsylvania, Brockway area. I was born in DuBois. I was raised in Brockway. I went to high school at Brockway area high school. We were the Rovers. It was kind of a small town in the fact that everybody knew everything about everybody else. And, to be honest with you, it was kind of nice because I had interaction with a lot of adults that were able to mold and guide me in the way I should go. However, I had my own ideas of what I wanted to do. So I played in a lot of rock bands. I was your typical teenager, like to go out and drink the beer with my friends and do stuff like that. And it wasn't too long that was fleeting. It wasn't enough for me in life to stay there. And after talking to my uncle, who was a Vietnam vet, he was a door gunner in the Marines on a medevac. And he had always told us, whatever you do, don't join the Marines. And I was like, why? It couldn't be too bad. He was like, don't join the Marines. He was wounded in Vietnam. Until one night I was at his house and he had a reel-to-reel recorder in the bedroom, and my cousin went and found it under the bed and pulled it out. We didn't know what was on it. We were going to play some old music, reel-to-reel. We thought that'd be cool. So when we pulled it out, there's a tape on it. And I remember my cousin, he hit the button and all of a sudden we heard Vietnam live. It was recorded, I found out later it was recorded at Da Nang when they were under attack one time, and he was listening to music, accidentally hit the record button and recorded most of the battle till the tape ran out. At that point, being the young boys we were like, that sounds really cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. And so we bantered back and forth a little bit, and as time progressed, we decided that we were going to join the service. And we all ended up going in the Army, of course. Sorry to the Marines here, but we appreciate what you all do too. So I ended up enlisting in 1989. I ran from the recruiter because I got scared. I still had stars in my eyes. I thought, well, I'm going to go play rock and roll for the rest of my life. So there's no reason for me to even mess with the Army. I was doing well, you know, of course, trying to get a record deal and stuff like that. And lo and behold, I got in a little bit of trouble with the police. And I remember going to the magistrate's office, and boom, he was like, there is a way we can fix this. And so I left right from there, went to the recruiting office, and ended up shipping in 1990. I went in initially, I was going to be in communications. I thought, well, you know, at least I'll pick a job that I can use when I come out. I went into communications. I was a 31 Delta when I went in, which is a pretty much cellular telephones of the battlefield. So I had to learn a lot of schematics and things like that. And I did enjoy it, but I didn't like it so much because there weren't enough guns involved. And I had this draw for some reason to do that. I just, it wasn't that I wanted to be heroic or anything like that. I think looking back now, it was, I just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make my mark. Went in the Army for 4 years as a communicator, and I got bored with it real fast. I ended up supporting Ranger units, cavalry units. I was always called to go support these different units, and I was always into the camaraderie that they had in those combat armed units. It was really hard to describe the way they talked to each other. And it's like they always, the brotherhood was just unreal. So it didn't take me too long that I traded in my radio for a gun. I was like, you know what, this is the route I'm gonna go. So I ended up switching over, became a Cav Scout. At that point, I said I was no longer in the Army, I was in the cavalry, because it was a way of life. It seemed like an apprenticeship to me. There were new skills to learn, and I wanted to learn them. At this point, I never thought about what I'd have to do if I ever went overseas, and actually had to use the skills that I was training to do, because I was still a young buck sergeant. That's an E5 for those of you who don't know. And then 9/11 happened. And guess what? We're going to war, guys. And let me tell you, we were excited. We wanted to go. There was no reason in our minds, both as professional NCOs at the time, and even our soldiers wanted to go. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to do something. Not realizing what the price was that we were going to have to pay. So my first deployment was to Iraq, and as part of the global war, was to Iraq in 2003. We were there for the initial push, and we went all the way to Baghdad. And I remember getting in Baghdad and looking around. I was like, oh, this ain't too bad. You know, never mind that people were shooting at us. I was like, this ain't too bad. It's kind of like being tried by fire, you know. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I can do this. This is something I can do for the rest of my life. Of course, this was my first major deployment that I was thinking this on. And which brings me to, there's two things that I wanted to touch on tonight that stick in my mind. A lot of stuff happens in combat that you don't necessarily remember. There's a lot of things that I don't, so much happens so fast that every little detail is almost impossible to remember. But you always remember the first time you got shot at. And I remember the first incident I had was in Al Hilla, Iraq. We were at a FOB. And boy, I'll tell you, we started off with a bang, literally. We were there for 4 months. All we took was small arms and things of that nature. Nothing that wasn't manageable that we felt. You know, we took our losses, we took our licks, but we drove forward. That's what you do when you're a soldier or you're a service member. But this particular time, I was part of a multinational division. The commander said, hey, I need you to get out of this place called Al-Hila, Iraq. And I need you to meet up with a Polish commander. Okay. So I get there, and there was definitely a language barrier. And through interpretation, the guy said, hey, I need to introduce you to the Hungarians, and I need to introduce you to there were several. The Filipinos had sent a police force there. The Mongolians were there. The Hungarians. I could go on about the list of different countries that came together as a coalition there in Al-Hila. And the area that they picked was it was actually Saddam Hussein's Air Force officer barracks, where he housed them when they were there. In fact, when we rolled up on the camp, I remember them opening the back of a dumpster, and it was full of gold bars, none of which we could keep, but they were there. And so we were getting set in, and my job was to set security. First thing I noticed was a fuel truck parked in the entrance of what was soon to become the fob. And that kind of bothered me, because I was like, that has to move. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I went up and I knocked on the door, and there was a Polish soldier in there. And the NCO said, yeah, treat him like your own. So I did. I opened the door and I grabbed him and I threw him on the ground. I said, what are you doing? He was sleeping. So here he is parked in a fuel truck on a main route on the way into the fob. Not a good mixture. So we got the situation fixed and finally started setting perimeter. Well, people were watching the whole time. What was probably about 3 months after that there were two VBIDs, we call them. They were vehicle-borne IEDs. And one was a car, and one was a kind of like one of these septic trucks. You've seen the septic truck, they go around, they suck out. Well, the septic truck was packed in the back full of explosives, we found out later. And the car that blew the wall down was also laden with explosives. We also found out that the people driving those vehicles, families were held hostage, and said that they told these guys, they said, you'll go drive these vehicles or we're going to kill your family. So, of course, they made the sacrifice, and here again, who's the real enemy? I'm thinking when we found that out. So the first car hit the gate, hit the berm, it blew this big hole. And we had moved into the barracks because for like 4 months, we didn't have any amenities at all. So we put a couple cots in there. We got them from supply, and we set up a guard point there. And the second vehicle was heading right for us. It was probably about maybe 100 meters from the building when it went off. And all I remember is seeing white. The room turned white, and I fell to the ground. And I remember looking around. It wasn't cool anymore. All of a sudden, this ain't cool. And I remember all the white that I saw, and I kept reciting to myself. And I think one of the sergeants heard me say it. I kept saying, don't go towards the light. Do not go towards the light. I thought I was dead. And I looked over and I saw a bloody leg. It was one of the sergeants. He took some glass in his leg, and I had some glass and pieces of concrete in my leg from the wall exploding in. And we had to get our wits about us real quick and get everything secured. Once again, of course, that's just the way they were dealing. The enemy dealt that day. We got reports later that there was sarin gas mixed in with the explosives that was consumed in the explosion. We were concerned about possible nerve damage and stuff like that. But the unique thing is, the Army in all its graces, when I called up the report shortly after, said, Charlie, Mike, that means continue mission. So we put people on medevac planes, and we flew them out. And then at that point, you had to deal with the aftermath of what went on. The fight was not over then. It was just starting. And I remember thinking in my mind, how am I going to get these guys together to keep going here? What am I possibly going to say or do? So I called the chaplain. They declared the roads black. They wouldn't even put people on the roads at that point to come down to us. And thank God, our chaplain, he said, oh, I'm going down there. So against orders, he grabbed his driver, he got another truck, drove down, and sat and prayed with my guys because they were pretty shaken up. And believe it or not, that was one of the things that got us through that. That's one event there. And I'm not going to go into the rest of the deployment, but that always stuck in my mind. The second biggest thing that stuck in my mind was when I was at 10th Mountain Division. We were up in a place called Nuristan, Afghanistan. And just recently, there's a movie that came out called The Outpost. If you have a chance to watch it, and I'll say his name, Ben Keating at the end, was a guy that I knew. He was in my troop. He was a lieutenant. And to this day, I miss him. My last words to Ben Keating were, "One of these days, sir, the enemy is going to wipe that smile off your face." And the way it happened was Ben was out and he had moved to a different platoon. And our platoon leader was there. And we were just doing the normal daily stuff, stocking the trucks with 3 days supply because we were going out on a mounted patrol in Humvees. And he was always smiling. His father was a minister and he had a strong faith. And I remember Ben was up on the truck and he made a joke and I didn't hear it. He said, "How you feel, Sergeant Askey?" I said, I feel pretty good, but don't you think we should be focused, sir?" And he started laughing. He said, "I am focused." I said, "Well, one of these days, the enemy's going to wipe that smile off your face." A couple weeks later, when we dropped their platoon and came back, he was killed in a rollover. And that's kind of bothered me to this day, because of the fact that, I wish that my words to him could have been a little bit better instead, because he was a fine man. He was a good one. So that same deployment with 10th Mountain, we went up into the Gardesh Valley. Now around springtime in Afghanistan, that's when all the enemy infills into the country. And as austere of an environment as it is over there, when the enemy would come into the country, you knew that it was game on. I'd say out of a 365-day period, just about every day we were in some form of contact with the enemy. And at the time we had 8 different forms. Either we were, direct firefight or getting mortared or something like that. And we were out one time, we were called out to go up to the Gardesh Valley. Our job was to go and secure a bridge. The reason we were securing the bridge was because the Taliban and other fighters that were coming with them were crossing that bridge into Afghanistan. So our job was to secure that bridge, make sure nobody got through it, to cross over up into the border of Pakistan and set OPs and patrol. My piece of the pie was to go, I was a senior scout at the time, was to go set at the Gardesh Bridge and make sure nothing came across it. We called it the Alamo. That was our little Alamo. And we had gone out there several times. And mostly the enemy would shoot a few rockets or a few mortars or some harassing fire and run away. And then we'd chase them for a week, get eaten by bugs. And we'd go right back to that same point again. So it was probably, I'd say about 3 months that we were going back and forth, and we got caught out one time and they said, "Hey, we need you to go out there. We're going to send some kill teams up along the ridge line. And we're going to try to interdict these guys before they even get close to the bridge." They wanted to keep them back further. Well, we were sitting at the bridge. It was one morning, and I remember, if anybody's ever been on a patrol base, it's kind of a unique situation where there's nothing around you. You're just out there. You have normally three gun positions set in like a triangular pattern. And you watch for days. You could be there 7 days. You could be there 2 weeks. And then you run little patrols out of there. And any of the infantry guys here or scouts that might have done it, then you implement all the necessary workflow that you need to keep that patrol base up and running, like food supply and all that stuff. Well, it's probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, and across the ridge where the snipers were moving, we started hearing a lot of gunfire and seeing a lot of RPGs. And we took a couple rockets, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, it's pretty nasty over there. So we got on the radio. We had some A-10s that came in, and they wanted to provide air support. We had 155s. Those are artillery rounds that fired from Fob Nare. And we had 120 millimeter mortars set down at the base of the hill that we were overwatching. And I remember a good friend of mine And I'm not going to say his name because I haven't talked to his family. Some of you will probably know him. He came on the radio, and he was pretty scared. I could tell I'd never heard that in his voice before. So we grabbed the binos and I looked over and I could see generally where he was at, and it was just crawling with Taliban. And I thought, boy, what do we do? So then he called up to a couple of the guys over there who had been hit. We didn't know who they were or anything like that. And then all of a sudden his voice started getting weaker. And I remember listening to him on the radio, kind of feeling helpless, like what's going on. His call sign was Chaos 35. He was a forward observer for the unit. And I remember when the last transmission came over, there was a medic that picked up the radio and said, Chaos 35 is no longer with us. And that was a good friend of mine. My heart sank. I think everybody that day was both full of rage, and we didn't understand really why. I mean, this was a good guy. He was an excellent NCO. He was excellent at training soldiers. He was all American. He was everything that you'd want to be. This is a guy who his mother told us one Christmas the neighbor didn't have enough food to put on the table for Christmas. In fact, they didn't even have a Christmas tree. And she said, he went and took our Christmas tree without us knowing over to her house and set it up for her kids. They came down Christmas morning and the tree was gone because he had taken it out. He cared about people. He was a real person. And, at that point, I think in the movies, a lot of times when they depict something that happens in combat, it's like, it's a snapshot of time. This happened right here. And then it's over. Everybody goes home, right? Wrong. You don't go home. You get up the next day and you stuff it as far down inside as you can get it, so you can go out and you can go again. Those are two of the main events that stick in my mind, although there are others that I remember. And like I said, if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. I was right where I needed to be. To this day, there's nothing that I would want more than to put on that uniform and go back and do what I did before. Because those were times where I was right when I was a kid. I wanted to make a difference. Well, I did. Maybe not for the greater nation, but for those guys to my left and right, my brothers, I made a difference. And it feels good to know that I was part of something greater than myself. And I'll leave that at that. So at this point, what I'd like to talk to you about is one of my favorite things. What was life like as a soldier? And to be honest with you, if you're a soldier or a sailor, airman, Marine, everybody had a different hardship in their own. But a lot of times I get questions about, hey, how'd you get your food? Where did you go to the bathroom? When did you take a shower? Typically on a mission, I could plan on getting a shower every 2 weeks. But on initial infill, I've gone up to 4.5 months with no shower. In fact, it got to the point where a lot of us, and I'll say this, we would shave every stitch of hair on our body because we smelled like dogs if we didn't do that. We laid out there on an OP. It was something we did. I know that not everybody does that, but we would not get a shower. As far as food goes, it was pretty much an MRE. And I was joking with some people earlier, Bill and Rick there, about in Iraq. I look back to Iraq and they made a mistake with the food one time. And they were supposed to mix the rations when they sent it to us, but they sent us 3 months supply of spaghetti and meatballs. And I remember joking with the guys on the way to the chow hall every morning. I'd be like, hey, I wonder what's for breakfast this morning. And we'd be like, bacon, eggs, I don't know. Coffee? I don't know. Well, the coffee was always there, but it'd be, hey, spaghetti and meatballs. And then for dinner, it would be the same thing. We'd be all excited. Hey, I wonder if we're going to have steak for dinner tonight. We'd be walking down each other. Well, this went on for like 3 months until finally they got us tamales. Go figure. So that was a little bit of a problem. Shaving, like typically in the morning when you wake up, you get in a routine. Maybe you'll go to the fridge and you'll pour yourself a glass of milk or go make a cup of coffee or do something like that. Well, guess what? Soldiers don't always do that. My idea of a good cup of coffee was, and I'll tell you this, we were on an OP one time, and my buddy had a sock, and he brought a little bag of coffee. And we got a coffee pot from one of the locals, and we decided that we were going to make some coffee. And so he pulled out this sock and he put the coffee grounds in there, and we heated the water, and then we poured the water through the sock back into the thing. And it never dawned on me that that was a dirty sock, but that's just the way it was. You have to do things if you want to enjoy the simple amenities of life. The refrigerator, there's another big one. Now you wonder why a lot of veterans, when they come home, have trouble reintegrating or getting back into the civilian world. Some of us, like me, I had a new appreciation for a refrigerator. So anytime, like, I'd go to the fridge for the first couple of weeks, usually a month. I wouldn't even go to the refrigerator because I forget. After my first and second deployment, my third one, I kind of caught on. Yeah, there's a fridge now, I can use it. But I used to come home and just open the door just to see if the light was still on, or open the freezer, just cool air. Because it was amazing that I could actually put stuff in a refrigerator and pull it out later to use it. Because we didn't have those kind of things. One thing I will say is, from the Vietnam era, Korea, Vietnam, Bosnia, Kosovo, up to the Iraq, Afghanistan conflicts and all that wars and all that stuff with the global war, our equipment got better, but it still wasn't the best. It took a while for them, but we had it a lot better than a lot of the Vietnam and Korea era, undoubtedly. And I always say that I appreciate the Vietnam vets because they paved the way for us to have what we had. If they wouldn't have struggled so hard to make a difference, they would have never developed better body armor. They would have never developed better weapons. They would have never, things that kept us alive. And so, I thank you all for that, because sorry you had to live through that. But I look back at some of the old equipment, I'm like, but I do wish they'd bring the 45 back. Wish they'd bring it back. So that's all I have for you. I'm not going to bore you with anything big. I will tell you this, that now I'm working at the Harrisburg Vet Center. And some of you know where that is, some of you don't. But we help with reintegration of combat vets back into civilian life, kind of like I was. I'll always be a soldier, but every time I go to the vet center, I'm like, wow, here's a piece of home. I feel like there's a piece of home in the men and the women that I see there. And it's a perfectly reminder for me that there's still people out there that are struggling and need help. And that's something we can all get around and be part of. You don't have to have a job at a vet center or something like that to help somebody out. All you need to have is a little bit of a will and a desire to listen to them. And that will go a long way. If we can keep veterans, off the drugs and keep them out of the bottle and give them a better quality of life, hopefully they can enjoy something that they fought so hard for, which is their families and their life back here and their buddies that were there with them. And then the stories aren't nightmares anymore. They become dreams. And when they become dreams, they're a little bit easier to handle. So that's all I got for you, pending any questions from y'all. Yeah.
When you were overseas, did you ever ask yourself, what am I doing here? Or why am I here? Did that ever come into question? Why was I sent here?
I think those questions came after
And
the fact, when I came home. You know, because when I was there, I had an idea that somebody messed something up in diplomacy somewhere. I can say that there were a couple times that I wondered, why am I doing this specific thing that we're doing? You know, why do we have to go over here and do a patrol? Or what purpose does this serve? But unfortunately, as a soldier, I just take orders. You know, if the boss said, hey, we need you to go over here, I was going over there. And I couldn't say anything about it. My main concern was the soldiers under my charge and to fight the battles to hire that they couldn't fight themselves. And the fight, what I mean by that is, hey, how are we going to get fed? So anything that would sustain the mission was what I was focused on over there. It wasn't until I came home and started reintegrating that I started, and the news and the media was horrible. You know, even now I come back and I listen to it, I'm like, oh, horrible. Anything else?
I came back from my deployment overseas back 50 years ago. I remember clearly my first night. Do you?
Well, which deployment?
Pick one.
I would say that coming back from Iraq and my last deployment, we'll start there from Iraq. I remember my wife in a blue dress. And I wanted to go get a steak dinner. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go get a steak dinner. I wanted to go home. I wanted to see my family. I wanted to sleep in a real bed. Unfortunately, I had a hard time sleeping in a real bed. It was more than it was cracked up to be, because I was used to sleeping on the ground. So I would roll over and sleep on the floor. I'd sleep in the back of my truck. I'd sleep out in the woods if I had. I felt better in the woods. I did not like sleeping. It was a good idea, but yeah, does that kind of answer your question? But yes, once in a while, I'll have a dream or something like that, where it's like I'm actually back in Afghanistan or Iraq, and it seems so real. And then I wake up and it's like, whew, man, I wonder what I ate, you know. Anyone else?
Back after Vietnam, we weren't received very well 50 years ago. I'm wondering how about those of you who served in Iraq and Afghanistan? Did you ever come back to any animosity and felt that your time spent there was totally worthless?
Not on a national scale like you all had it. I think that it was more self-induced for us. We had a much better homecoming than y'all had. That's straight up. In fact, here's the irony of it. When I talk to Vietnam vets and I see the movies and all that other stuff, I know it's just Hollywood. There was such to me, it's cruel treatment. A lot of these men and women went over there to fight and to do something for you. They didn't even know why they were there. You know, so don't put politics on them. Let them come home. Let them come home, but they didn't want to do that. So you all took your uniforms off and wouldn't go downtown. Correct me if I'm wrong. You wouldn't go down in the public square with your uniform on when you come back from Vietnam. Well, mine was the opposite. When I came back from, I was coming home from Afghanistan one time, and I remember going to the USO because they used to line us up to parade us out to the airplane, and people would clap and cheer. And it always bothered me. So what I did, and this actually started after my second deployment, I would take civilian clothes and put them in my backpack. I'd run into the bathroom. I'd take my uniform off, a lot like you guys did, only it wasn't because I was going to get beat. It was because I didn't want to get recognized. And I'd stuff those my BDUs and stuff in my uniform down in the bag, put my civilians on it, and I come out. And I remember one time I came out and I was clapping and cheering for the soldiers as they were coming off. And I just came off the same plane that they did. And one of my sergeants looked at me, he was like, "Sergeant A, what are you doing?" I was like, "Hey, good job, soldier." And they just kept walking by. And I just thought that was ironic that that a lot of the Vietnam vets took their uniforms off for a different reason than I took mine off. You know, so I think you got to have a balance there. I think it could be bad either way. That's just my personal opinion. I think we did what we did, expecting nothing. A lot of us didn't expect nothing in return. I mean, I just wanted to come home and get back to life. That was it. And then go out and do it again, because I love doing that stuff. Yep.
Along with that, what goes through your mind, like a dinner tonight, lady comes up to say, thank you for serving. What goes through your mind?
Now, I wish I was still serving. That's what goes through my mind. I'd do it again. And I know that sounds kind of cheeky. At first, I didn't like that. When I first got out, it took me a couple of years because I retired in 2016. It bugged me when somebody said, thank you for your service. My first response would be, you know what, if you want to thank me, there's a recruiting office right over there. Why don't you go enlist, get a rifle, and go help out? But you know, that we're an all volunteer force now. I mean, so back in the day, I probably would have been an RA. I probably would have enlisted because I'm one of those crazy types. That's what I would have wanted to do. So yeah, but now I can look at it and I can appreciate it.
Well, I think when you came back, did you have a period back when you were doing garrison stuff like training others? So what did you do, or did you get out of your last tour and retire then?
Well, in between deployments, maybe this will help, Tom. In between deployments, we didn't have a whole lot of time. So we would go right to training because we had the National Training Center, NTC, we had JRTC. So depending on whether we were going to Iraq or Afghanistan on our next deployment, we might be back on home station. We called it dwell time. My shortest dwell time was 10 months. I signed a paper to waive to go back. So I came home, I got reset, went to the ranges. Usually you go to schools like NCO academies, sniper schools, reconnaissance schools. So you might come back and have a year with your family. And I say that lightly because it's usually not a year, because out of that year, probably about 4 or 5 months of that is pretty solid training. And then when you are with your family, you don't have time. There's no time. So then you go back and you redeploy back to theater. So it might be 2, 3, 4 years before you get to deal with stuff that happened with your family. Now, a lot of the services do a good job as far as finances and things like that. But no, we were constantly doing something. We had to, because the training schedules were set usually at least a good 6 months out, the ranges. So we knew where we were going to go, what we were going to do. And mission could change. Like one time we were supposed to go to Afghanistan. So we had to retrain, refit, and go to Iraq. That help out, Tom?
You know what you said about how Vietnam kind of helped with modernizing weapons and new things like that. And just what you're getting at about you guys were applauded. What sort of
Oh, applauded.
when
Here you
came
go,
back, like you and Rick and Jen, when you folks came back. And I think that's what helped wake up America, United States, that, hey, we didn't treat those Vietnam vets very well. And you guys helped open the doors that we could get the help that we needed.
I never thought of that way, but that's if
So in a way, we helped you.
Yeah.
In a way, you helped us.
I hope so. I really hope so, because war can be ugly. People can be ugly. I mean, I think looking back at the whole experience, and I was just real little at the end of Vietnam, by the time Vietnam was ending. I didn't know any difference because I grew up in a household that really supported our service members. It's too bad that folks don't talk about that a lot. The people that did support the service member, the soldiers, the people that went, whether they were RA drafted, whatever. You know, I appreciate that. You know, I appreciate what you all did. I can't say enough about the Vietnam era vets. I mean, like after being in the war myself, and I look back at what we had to help us fight the fight, y'all did a mighty fine job. Now, maybe DC didn't do a mighty fine job, but y'all did a mighty fine job. Yeah.
I take it from what you've said, you were deployed a number of times. Can you just,
So,
how many?
so in terms of combat tours, it's 9.
9.
Yep, that's combat tours. So I had 5 deployments. So I deployed 5 times. One deployment I was extended for because a tour is usually like a 6-month period now, the way that they do the service stripes on your arm. So in terms of time, it was about 5 years. I spent 5
So
years.
it could
in
go,
combat.
you could go to either place, Iraq or Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And in fact, there were 2 totally different fights too. And that was a real challenge because for those of you who have been to war, if you've been in a theater, when you leave that theater of operation and you fought an enemy, by the time you come back a year later, they got smarter. The enemy gets smarter. They get smarter while you're there. So you have to keep staying sharp. So, and it's difficult because the Iraqi fighters and the Afghani fighters were so different. And this is what I observed. The Iraqis were kind of like cowards. They would hit you and run away. The Afghani fighters, they were sticking around. They weren't going nowhere. And they would stay and maneuver on you and do whatever they had to do, because you got to remember, Afghanistan, they fought the Russians. Even take it all the way back to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great couldn't even conquer them. I mean, like there were just years. In fact, there's a lot of people in Afghanistan I couldn't figure out when I was there. They dyed their hair red. And I was like, why are they, and I have red hair naturally. I was like, why does everybody want to be like me? You know? And they were like, no, Alexander the Great had red hair. And I don't know how true that is, but that's what they were saying. So kind of popped my bubble. I was like, great. Now you're going to compare me to old Alexander. But yeah, the Afghanis, I did respect, you always respect your enemy to the point that of what they can do to you. You know, there's I call, for a soldier, that's a healthy respect to have. But I'll tell you what, those Afghanis can fight. Got to hand it to them. They didn't get me though. Or Ricky.
Mark, I think you should mention that your wife is also a veteran.
Yeah, so our family situation, thanks, Bill. Our family, we have a kind of a dynamic family. My wife was a medic in the National Guard. She's been to Iraq as well. So it's hard for me to pull out that card. Well, you know, Jen, I've been to war, so I'm a little bit different than you. So imagine that argument.
Jen can pull it too.
So, yeah, and you know, I think honestly, the best thing that helped me when I come back was that little girl right there, my granddaughter. Family was the best therapy. I remember the day that she was born and I held her. That was an instantaneous change right there. I knew at that point that I had to do something different. And not in a bad way, but she's become, you know, kind of like the catalyst behind me wanting to do things better. Because I want her to have a better world too. Which is kind of funny because when I was in Afghanistan, a lot of the Mujahideen, if you know who the Mujahideen was, a lot of those fighters didn't want to fight anymore because they would tell us, look, we got kids, we don't want to fight. So, and that gives us hope because we know that the next generation, maybe there'll be something better. Anything else? All right.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.